Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it's that segment of the show where we bring you discussions to brighten your morning. And this morning, we are looking at 3 months to the June deadline for the subsidy removal. Plans by the federal government to scrap the scheme may have met resistance from the public and labor unions over lack of clarity regarding the process and availability of social investment programs that would cushion the effect of the planned exercise. President Muhammadu Buhari, who is to step down on the May 29, had planned to remove the popular but costly subsidy in 2022 as part of the fiscal and petroleum sector reforms, but abandoned the plan because of fears of protests in the run-up to the 2023 general elections. Previous administration had also promised to remove the fuel subsidy, which many economics say is an unsustainable drag on public finance, but have failed to do so because of the fierce opposition from the citizenry. While there have been calls for a holistic and well-phased approach towards subsidy removal, anxiety continued to prevail as the possible effect of such a decision, despite being economically expedient, may throw the nation's fiscal position expedience if the nation's fiscal positions would not further be jeopardized. What will be the impact of subsidy removal, for instance, on the cost of transportation? We have joining us in the studio two gentlemen with in-depth knowledge on this subject. Malam Jamil Mohammed, a public affairs analyst, and Mr. Kingsley Eze, co-founder and CEO of Naira Z, if I'm not mistaken, Nigeria. Thank you very much, Malam. And thank you very much also, Mr. Eze, for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having us.
All right, I'm starting with you. We've been in the studio a couple of times where we have had to look at this issue of subsidy. Petroleum subsidy, particularly, as I like to describe it, is an emotional conversation for Nigerians because of its wide-reaching implication. Just yesterday, the minister again disclosed to Nigerians that it has secured $800 million that it will use to cushion the effect of the subsidy removal on 10,000 households, if you like, or 50 million Nigerians, as you like to describe it. What do you make of all of these governments' varied voices? 1 minute they say we are leaving this to the incoming administration. The next minute, the labor minister was saying we are proposing some kind of salary increase for civil servants as a cushioning effect. And then the next minute, we have already secured approval from the World Bank for 800 million, what they describe as the first phase to be shared. What's your initial impression when you were hit with this information?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, viewers. My initial impression is that's what has always been lack of transparency in the issue of fuel subsidy. It's a very grave economic, I don't want to say crime, let me put it as an offense. $800 million is roughly about
360 billion,
370 billion. Yes, at 460 per dollar. That is roughly about 5-6% of what the government claims now to be spending on subsidy, about 6 trillion. So if you remove 6 trillion from the system, you are cushioning the effect with 6% of it as a first phase. Now, I know the government has made a certain move towards this. Not only the $800 million, but the government has created the platform upon which to use the 800 billion naira, $800 million. This platform is the current National Social Investment Program. Now, I know there's an executive bill that has been sent to the Senate and it has passed the third reading on creating an agency to handle the policy. Now it is going to be a legal framework. It is going to be run on a legal framework, an agency. So I'm sure the $800 million would come on this platform. That's how I see it. Okay, but about 6% of this to this number of households they have said and the number of citizens, I doubt if this will cushion the effect immediately. That will not do it. But what the government is saying, that it is saying this is a phase transition. If it is a phase transition, what are we expecting again? The next thing is, why World Bank? Why go to World Bank to secure this? You are removing the subsidy. Why not use the money to fund the program? So I'm surprised to hear that you will go to World Bank and then collect this. And I'm sure it is at a certain interest rate. That is draining from the economy again. So I think that lack of transparency, not only in the fuel subsidy regime, in paying the fuel subsidy regime, the lack of transparency is translating into the administration itself, the administration of the fuel subsidy. The operations, there's already lack of transparency. And then now the administration too, there's lack of transparency. So I think this is a very big problem.
All right, Mr. Eze, let me come to you with this. So there's a general agreement the subsidy has to go because there's a drain on the economy and the rest of it. And now we're talking about palliatives. We've started with this $800 million. For how long can we continue with this palliative measure? And are we digging a further hole for ourselves by introducing this now and thinking about continuing it for a period of time? What resource, where are we going to get the resources for that? And how can we be able to sustain it? And when the time comes for us to stop these palliatives now, what do we do? Are we digging a further hole for ourselves by starting these palliative measures as it is?
Thank you for having me. Thank you, viewers, for listening. To answer your question direct, with the current framework of transferring a certain amount of money to the National Social Register directly, 10,000, 5,000, do the math. Nigeria is a population of over 200. To be very, very conservative, let's leave that number at 200. If you divide $800 million US by 200 million persons, each person is just getting 2,300 or thereabouts. Do the math. So it just shows you that 2,300 can't afford you, 5 rides to your office if you get that money. So by the time you know that this would not work this way, it becomes a case of making the best out of what you have. If Nigeria secured $800 million, good and fine, like my colleague has just said. But how do you intend to make sure that you spend this $800 million and it's sustainable? Which is where most people of my personal opinion, is for this money to be invested in creating the right infrastructure for what you gain from the subsidy. Subsidy is used for subsidizing mobility and logistics. Nobody drinks fuel or probably energy, but 80% of subsidy is for people to get from point A to point B. So making sure that you digitize transportation, making sure you work with operators. If you go to India, you subsidize using operators, not sending the money to citizens. Because if you send the money to citizens, the operators could hike their price, and that sucks away everything that you've gained from sending money to the citizens. So operators that, you have bus companies, you have digital transportation, you even have foreign players that come into Nigeria and make a profit from selling transportation as a service. We see some legacy bus companies that have been operating for years, 10 years, and they are profitable, to show you that there's a way government can have a framework, have bus companies, operators, buses provided for, then subsidize that cost of transportation using operators. It is a better and a more sustainable way, tried and true in different parts of the world. If you want to have, you tell people, rich people, you can go and fill up your gas tanks at the current price. But for micro Nigerians, for every Nigerian that need access to affordable transportation, you'll be like, okay, we have done this through ABC Transport. They will keep their price at the current fare because we are now subsidizing. Nairaxi, we are also helping you guys to digitize, to scale your service from 1 state to 36 states through that way. And now for the operators, you have access to their database. You make sure that for every service they deliver, which is actually a citizen that you have impacted, you have access to that database.
But that doesn't seem to be the plan of the federal government.
That is why I am I am saying this is a personal opinion. If you transfer the money straight to the citizens, we've done the math, 2005, that the operators will hike their price. So what you need to do is you go for where you have the long-term benefit. If Nigerians are seeing buses with federal government logo on it, you can enter this bus, you are meant to pay 500 but pay 300. Government is subsidizing 200 for each ride. It is more sustainable than transferring that money to the social register.
Interesting. Coming back to you, listening to what AZ has said and what is global best practice across the world, it does appear that we are substituting mangoes for apple, because what we, like he rightly pointed out, what we want to address is the impact of high transportation on our operations, whether it is going to work or bringing farm produce from the rural areas to the urban areas. If we apply this money by way of social distribution, as they have mentioned, households will misapply this money and still take the shocks of the removal of subsidy from increased transportation, increased cost of mobility. Is it that the government doesn't understand these two things, or it is pretending not to understand it? Because I say this in the light of the fact that when we tried it in 2012, what the government tried to do was to say we have procured 80, 100, 500 buses for these high density areas, and for the low density area we are providing 14, 18 seater buses, and things that directly impact on the sector to keep prices low. What's your impression of how we have gone about these things, besides talking about the transparency? Is there a complete lack of understanding of what we need to do?
The problem arose from the foundation. You see, when this subsidy was introduced, we have two major types of subsidies. You have the consumption subsidy and you have the production subsidy. What we now have is the consumption subsidy. Government is subsidizing consumption, which is absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. If you want to subsidize an economy, subsidize production, which is what Mr. Eze has said. When you channel the money to those carriers, you are now subsidizing production. Subsidizing consumption is like running a welfarist economy. You see, the problem with subsidy is globally we have energy subsidies, we have agricultural subsidies. The problem with subsidies generally is that people, citizens, seem to define subsidies as social contract items. This is our own resource, so give us free. We are entitled to it free. It is a wrong notion anyway, but that is what is happening in all over the world when you define subsidies. So it is the duty of the government to come out clearly, transparently, and show the citizens that, look, this is consumption subsidy. We agree, if it is part of your social contract, government will give you Example, water. I've seen countries where there was resistance in paying water bills. They say government is supposed to supply water free. So this is how people look at oil too, that this is our own resource, give us free. Okay, the government now has a responsibility of coming out with programs. What is the duty of the National Orientation Agency? Reorient the psyche, the thinking, the mentality of Nigerians that look, subsidy, apart from its natural course of consuming your own resources inefficiently, there's a lot of corruption inside. This is the orientation that tell Nigerians that look, there's a lot of corruption. You see, the corruption is even in phases. You pad cost. There's cost padding in our own case.
That's right.
You pad the cost of subsidy. Another cabal will be padding quantity. Quantity of fuel supply. Right? All our agencies are giving different figures. Nigerian midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory agency is giving us a figure around, in fact, it gave two figures, 62 million liters per day, then 66. Two from the same agency. The National Bureau for Statistics says that Nigeria has no template. That's what it says. So it doesn't even have standard figures. And it is even querying the figures being bandied. Customs are giving 98 million liters per day. Right? And then it reviewed it to about 88. The same agency. NNPC is giving us a lump figure. It gave us the amount of imports per period. And if you calculate that, you get to around 61 million liters per day. So look at Ministry of Finance gave us not the figures, it gave us the amount Nigeria is spending. It says about 250 billion per month. And then it says the subsidy per liter is between 350 and 400 naira per liter. If you calculate that, you will get the amount of liters consumed by Nigerians daily to be around 21 million. So look at how varied these figures are. My belief is these figures are padded from one agency to another. Right? Okay. Then that is the quantity padding. This is the corruption that is inside. This is the quantity padding. If you come to the cost padding, if you calculate the figures given by Ministry of Finance, you find out that they said the subsidy being paid 350 to 400 naira per liter. Right? But NNPC told us that if subsidy is removed, we will come to have a liter selling for 462 naira per liter. Okay, what is the difference between what we now pay per liter is 195. It means if you remove 195 from 462 as given by NNPC, you have roughly about 267 naira per liter. That is what government is paying on subsidy. But the Ministry of Finance is telling us that it is 400. A difference of about 133 naira per liter. Apply that 133 naira per liter difference, which I term to be corruption. Apply that to 20 million liters. Then you will find out the amount of money running through corruption in the system. So this is cost padding, this is quantity padding. Both, and I'm not discounting the possibility that you will come to find out that there is even a cabal that joins the two. parts quantity and then
cost.
parts cost. So with this, if you bring everything together, and then, although government may not be able to do this, private individuals, non-governmental organizations, this is the academia, this is your own responsibility. Enlighten the citizens. Look, you may want to consume this as free, but you are consuming it at the cost of this corruption. If Nigerians want it that way, fine, go for it. And this is what we are suffering now. As he has said, why not, instead of, if you are subsidizing production, of course, transportation infrastructure, railway, good roads, very good administration, not only the infrastructure, the administration of the infrastructure too is key. Because that is, time was when we had toll gates. Suddenly they say they removed the toll gates again.
And now they're discussing bringing them back.
And they are discussing bringing it back. You see, back and forth, principle, there is no that bedrock economic principle to put this thing on. That was how subsidy came. There was no principle. Just that this is Nigeria's, this is your laggies, just take it.
All right.
There was no economic thinking in it.
All right, lots of issues to actually look at. We were just sort of talking about subsidy, subsidy removal, the figures, and of course how we go about doing that. Is still Daybreak right here on Trust TV. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll take a look at how the subsidy removal, or lack thereof, will have effects on the Nigerian economy and of course, most especially small businesses. Just stay with us.
Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we've been looking at issues around the subsidy, the removal, and the likely implication on our economy. And we have a public affairs analyst in the studio with us, Mr. Jamil, and Mr. Eze, who is the founder and CEO of Nairaxi, Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Eze, I haven't listened to Mr. Jamil and all the issues that he raised. There's another Jamil issue in the horizon, which is the threat by labor. That until we are satisfied with what the metrics are, you are not going to surprise us with another removal. Is the position of labor justified at this point in time, given the multiplicity of information coming out from the same government, especially when it borders on the integrity of the information? Are they justified to say we are not prepared for any removal until we are satisfied that the conditions are amenable for Nigerians to take the impact of the subsidy?
Yes, to answer that question, the position of the labor is 100% justified. Nigeria is a very rich country. I hope you know that. We sell approximately 1 million barrels of oil every single day. Approximately, just 1 million. I'm sure it should be around 1.4. Peak period during Jonathan's era, OBJ's era, it was around 2 million barrels. So that's a lot of money. in the international oil market, a barrel of oil is $65 on an average for now. So imagine 65 million US dollars coming into the country. The question now is, what did you do with it? That is the question of labor. Why didn't you repair the refineries? Why is a single individual like Dangote able to get a refinery up and running in less than 6-7 years, and you had over 30 years to make those kind of repairs or even build brand new refineries? So the position of labor is, before you remove subsidy, fix the refineries, justify the revenue you collected. If there was no revenue, then everybody understands.
But the argument from some quarters is which should come before the other. As clearly demonstrated by Mr. Jamil, this economy is hemorrhaging. And there will be no time to apply anesthesia and put it to sleep before you do the fixing, because it has to be up. There are bills. I mean, the bills are not sleeping.
Yeah.
So the question would be, which should come before the other? Do we stop the hemorrhage as it would? Because we are in a medical emergency, keep the patients alive before we apply other things, or we have to practically wait for when the conditions are completely perfect. Because you talked about sales, we are now beginning to read reports that in the last 3 weeks we are struggling to find buyers for our crude. We have not made anything of the windfall, unfortunately, between Russia and Ukraine. We have not seen it. The NNPC has not remitted a dime since January 2022. Can we continue to take on, as at year to date, we have spent about 4 trillion naira already on subsidy.
Yeah.
How much longer can we wait to justify the conditions that labor is asking for before this plague is put in check?
Like you rightfully said, the condition is worse at the moment. We did not make do while the sun was shining. So it's a mistake on the part of the government. Yeah. But having made that mistake, that is where the issue of transparency comes in play. You have to reliably educate the citizens, get the data and statistics right, because that is injustice. Trying to transfer the negative effect to the citizens, and you enjoyed the positive effect. A group of people enjoyed the positive effect when the going was going great. So if you made a mistake, you call a roundtable conference. The NLC, Nigerian Student Union, small business, Smeden can help you with small business. You also get the academia, the intellectuals, entrepreneurs, get everybody involved, and you throw that question, what do we do in this kind of situation? Getting the data right, technology can help you in getting data right. You can digitize the supply aspect of it and the demand aspect of the fuel subsidy question. In terms of the short-term impact, you can start shoring it up. Okay, labor, can we provide buses for your members to be able to afford affordable transportation to and fro work? For logistics, how do we help trucking companies to move their goods at the same cost or at a subsidized cost? The London bus service, for example, is 30% subsidized. So if I'm paying £5, I'm sure that the governments have taken care of 30% of that. It should be nearing the neighborhood of around you get what I mean. So it becomes that way, that as I'm paying 200, the citizens feel that government is doing a corresponding investment, like a joint partnership between the government and the citizens. We are all trying to go through this ugly situation together, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It is even that light that gives the citizens the moral enablement to go through the pain. If we save $6 trillion, you guys are going to have like one hospital in every local government. this is what we want to do with this 6 trillion that we have. And immediately they are seeing it. The first phase, you're having buses, you're having access to affordable transportation, you're having vouchers to afford affordable transportation, and corresponding infrastructural development that will justify the paying of the subsidy.
All right, Mr. Jamil, just to take it up from where Mr. Eze stopped, what then would be the best approach going forward? The minister has announced that this loan has been secured. We have 36 states with competing or varied priorities. So I'm sure some states will tell you whatever the quantity of our citizens you want to share this 10,000 to would not solve our problem. We would rather you give us what is a portion, what is our portion of that money, so that we look at a critical sector and apply it. And probably, as Eze would have said, say, okay, this is the proceeds of the 800, as we had with the Shopees. We saw buses labeled Shopees, we saw interventions tagged Shopees, so you could almost immediately relate that these were proceeds from Shopee. Would you rather, because the governors have made submissions to the National Economic Council on how they want these things to move forward, because it's not justifiable. In fact, how can we tell that the 10 million beneficiaries are not predominantly from a few states that are in bed with the administration? How can states that are not particularly of the same party with this government justify that a sizable proportion or an equitable proportion of their population got a good sharing from the 10 million? So what do you think would be a less controversial approach now that we have secured the loan, and clearly there will be we will not return those monies back to the World Bank?
And we are not even sure that the $800 million is going for that, because as I have said earlier, there is already a move to create an agency. It has passed the third reading, right? It will now go for concurrence at the House of Reps. From concurrence, now they bring it back to the president for assent. And this particular bill has given the framework through which to finance these social investment programs, including this 5,000 naira conditional cash transfer, the financing of the households, and so they are all embedded in this particular bill, and there's already a way of financing it. So why go and collect 800 million naira again when you know you are still going to pass this? You are bringing this agency on board. So the $800 million, I don't think, I still have a question mark on it. I have to study that. It is a new thing now. I have to study it, juxtapose it with the coming up of the agency. Okay, now the other side of it, how to go about this. Now, it's not about cushioning the effect. You see, cushioning the effect is temporal. It's temporary. You have given example of Shopees. Where are they now? See, they are not sustainable. Bring something that is sustainable. Sustainable is build the infrastructure. And we are not planning long term. We are always very short term, 2 years, 3 years. And this is why you made a statement that Nigeria, in the last few weeks or so, few months, we've been running helter-skelter looking for who will buy our oil. Okay, if the oil is not there, who will talk about subsidy? Now that the oil is there, we don't have buyers. Do you know why we don't have buyers? The world economy is transiting, the energy sector is transiting from fossil fuel to clean energy. In fact, I was shocked when I learned the first time that Dangote is investing this kind of money in a refinery. I was shocked. A person of Dangote status, I believe, should not have done that. There are better transitional sectors of energy where you would put that kind of money.
But some would argue that we don't see the world all transiting at the same time. Africa, as it does appear, would continue to depend on fossil fuel for the foreseeable future.
Yes, we would. Possibly, if you are talking about Africa.
That's right.
Yes, but certain economies in Africa will transit faster and very much faster. Places like Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, these ones will transit faster. You see, when I was looking at this thing called ECOWAS, I say ECOWAS is a joke. I don't understand how it is an economy. We will transit and leave them. You see, our GDP, Nigeria's GDP, is around 500 billion. 480. In fact, there was a time we reached 540. 540. Okay, now we are around 500, right?
That's right.
That's 480 to 500. Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, we are around that range.
Yes.
Come down to range of 300. There's no country in Africa in the $300 billion range GDP. 200, there's no country. 100, you have just about 2 countries.
Plus Lagos.
All of them now are below 100. And these are the countries that we are working with as brothers, that this is ECOWAS. When look at the disparity in our economy.
All right. So
I think looking at that, while saying that Nigeria, Africa will depend, you are talking about Africa, but certainly not countries like Nigeria, Egypt. We will transit faster, we will connect with the world, and what Dangote, my belief, what Dangote has done is, he has calculated Nigeria's consumption, and then those within the sub-Saharan Africa. That's why his own is 650
million barrels.
Okay, now look at what we consume daily. It's about 500 and something now.
Yes.
Barrels per day.
Yes.
Nigeria's consumption.
That's right.
Is 500 and something. So you see, it's going to that range. I think that was his calculation. But I believe Dangote should not invest in today. He should invest in the future.
All right.
That's my belief.
All right. Now, talking about the future quickly before we go, because we seem to be running out of time. So, Mr. Eze, I'd like to bring this to you, because you talked about it earlier, about when you were talking about labor and the Nigerian people as well, that this is going to be difficult. It's going to be a difficult period. The transition is going to be tough, and we're going to have to bite the bullet. But the thing is, with all the controversy surrounding the subsidy regime itself, and now the removal, and all these monies we're seeing coming in, we're hearing things that Mr. Jamil actually said that he has to interrogate a couple of things before he even believes it. How can we trust the government that they are going to use what we are saving from subsidy to make life better, or to bring in the infrastructure that we actually need? From that 6 trillion that we're spending, what if we save that money? How can we trust the government to actually make judicious use of it?
The issue of trust. If we are friends, what makes you to trust me is based on past performance. I gave you a tax, you did it. I trust you. But if you break that trust, it's hard to win it back. So when it comes to government and citizens, transparency is number one. Dialogue. A plan that people will buy into. Transparent data. And it's not rocket science to digitize consumption and production.
Can we do all that between now and June that they're trying to do?
Of course, there's a framework that has, privately, you see, for Naraxi as a company, we've been championing the fact that you need to digitize transportation and logistics and apply that model where you subsidize using operators. Why do you subsidize using operators? The operator's performance is tied to delivering a service. If subsidy continues to be free money sent to people's accounts, trust me, it's free money.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Eze. I wish I would allow you go on and on, but time is not our friend. But quite a number of lessons have been learned from the interventions that yourself and Malan Jamil had put forward today. The argument around the insincerity of the process, the corruption, whether it is on the quantity side or on the funding aspect, and what we need to do, as you have enumerated, going forward. We wish we had more room to continue to keep this gentleman loaded with all kinds of information in the studio, but we are very sorry. Time is not anybody's friend. There are so many other interesting development lined up for your consumption, and we have to call it a quit at this point. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Eze Kingsley, for coming to the studio with us.
Thank you for having us.
Someday we will take up that conversation on digitizing the process. Marlon Jamil, as always, we want to thank you for finding time to be with us.
Thank you very much.
And for providing our audience with such a useful perspective around the conversations we bring you to the studio to engage.
Thank you.
This is the much, like I said, we will bring to you at this hour. Stay tuned at the top of the hour for all the interesting packages lined up for you this beautiful Thursday morning. I am Sunday Michael Ogu. Let's do this again tomorrow.
All right, that's a wrap on Daybreak for today. As you said, we keep it a date. Tomorrow is another one. I am Ibrahim Yusuf.